Anti-Muslim or anti-Islam? Donald Trump's ban on Muslims entering the United States provokes a worldwide outcry. Is this the way to keep America safe? And what does it mean for millions of Muslims inside and outside America? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Martine Dennis. Now, there are protests at US airports from lawyers in court and political leaders abroad. But President Trump is refusing to drop his travel ban on citizens from 7 Muslim-majority countries. He says it's about protecting US citizens and preventing what he calls terrorist attacks. But can he justify the ban? And where does it leave Muslims living in the United States? Kimberly Halkett has this report from Washington, D.C.
Donald Trump isn't backing down. In a statement released Sunday, he defended his executive order, stating his policy is similar to what President Obama did in 2011, when he banned visas for refugees from Iraq for 6 months. The 7 countries named in the executive order are the same countries previously identified by the Obama administration as sources of terror. To be clear, this is not a Muslim ban, as the media is falsely reporting. And the president's chief of staff made clear, despite protests at U.S. airports, he feels there's no reason to apologize.
You know, it wasn't chaos. I mean, the fact of the matter is 325,000 people from foreign countries came into the United States yesterday, and 109 people were detained for further questioning.
The White House is also defending its decision to include in the order legal permanent residents or green card holders, arguing travelers can apply for a waiver.
Obviously, this process and these conclusions were not vetted. What about the Iraqi pilots that are training right now in Tucson, Arizona, learning to fly the F-16, and there will be more coming in?
This immigration lawyer agrees.
But we hear constantly changing information from the White House. It's clear that a few individuals wrote up this document for the executive order, but it wasn't really passed clearly through all the channels within the agencies, and so things have constantly been changing.
And legal challenges are mounting. In Virginia, lawyers are seeking guarantees from the court they'll be permitted access to those detained at U.S. points of entry, something the top Republican in the U.S. Senate supports.
It's going to ultimately be decided in the courts as to whether or not this has gone too far.
This Democratic senator says that's already happened, and the widespread anti-Muslim rhetoric will fuel backlash against Americans overseas.
These orders go against what America has always been about. The orders make us less humanitarian, less safe, less American.
Trump disagrees. On social media Sunday, he defended his actions, writing, "Our country needs strong borders and extreme vetting." But attorney generals from 16 U.S. states are condemning Trump's order. In a statement, they're promising to make sure as few people as possible suffer from what they call a chaotic situation they say was created by Donald Trump's order. Kimberly Halkett, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Well, as Kimberly mentioned there, the 7 countries listed in Trump's executive order were originally identified as of concern by President Obama. The United States has had tense relations with all of them. It's supporting rebels fighting the Syrian government, has been militarily engaged with Iraq for much of the last 30 years. It's bombing more than half of the 7 countries, Iraq, Syria, Libya and Yemen, in the battle against ISIL and other armed groups. White House officials say US intervention in Somalia has grown in the past year, particularly to fight al-Shabaab. And on the other hand, relations with Iran had seemed to be improving. The nuclear deal was signed in 2015 and the US lifted some sanctions last year. Same with Sudan. And his last week in office, President Obama announced the end of a 20-year economic embargo. All right, let's introduce our guests now. In Chicago, we have Saba Ahmed, president of the Republican Muslim Coalition. In Hanover, New Hampshire, Daniel Benjamin, a former counter-terrorism advisor with the US State Department and now director of the John Sloan Dickey Center for International Understanding at Dartmouth College. In Washington, D.C., we have Manal Omar. She's a fellow with the Truman National Security Project, which is a non-profit national security and development organization. She's also an American Muslim activist. Thank you all very much indeed. But Daniel, can I start with you? President Obama is responsible for this list of 7. You were an advisor to the Obama administration. Furthermore, President Obama suspended the issuance of visas for Iraqi refugees for 6 months in 2011. There wasn't a hue and cry about that. Why is there now?
Well, my recollection is that they weren't fully suspended, but actually admissions were slowed. And the list of the 7, I think, underscored countries that required, additional vetting of people who would be issued visas. That is all a very far cry from what we are seeing now with the shutdown of visas. And don't forget, we have an executive order that calls for halving the total number of refugees allowed into the nation, and also a indefinite discontinuation of our refugee program for Syria. So these are very, very serious things. Additionally, executive orders and administrative measures, such as the ones you referred to earlier, are typically taken with a great deal of consultation among the different members of the administration, that is, the different agencies. And this one was not consulted. It appears not to have had a legal review.
Okay,
and it happened instantly.
Can we get to the style of government in just a moment? Can I come to you now, Saba? You've been very, very vocal, certainly in the campaign period, in your support for Donald Trump. How do you feel today as a Muslim woman in the United States?
Well, I actually still believe Donald Trump has the right intentions in terms of securing our borders and improving our national security and defense. But obviously the way that this refugee ban played out was not very good. It didn't just target refugees, it targeted even green card holders and dual citizens of those 7 countries. So obviously the way it was implemented was not very efficient, and I wish that they had had a much more rigorous review with their legal counsel and staff, so we wouldn't have seen the mess that we did.
So you
but
think,
going forward, I do look forward to working with the Trump
just for clarity then, so you support what is being perceived as a ban on Muslims. Of course, President Trump denies that it's a Muslim ban, but you support this policy that is causing so much consternation around the world.
Well, I think we should be monitoring every single person who's coming into the country, regardless of their nationality. I think it's not just those 7 countries. I think it's going to be expanded.
But people are monitored. People are vetted. People are vetted very, very heavily to get into the United States already, and it seems very much as though these 7 countries have been plucked from from the entire world and targeted for this extra special, some say unfair treatment.
Well, there's some serious national security concerns coming from those countries in terms of terrorism, ISIS threats, and other issues that are going on in those. Syria, Iraq, especially with the ISIS threats right now, they are monitoring everyone who's coming in. And like I said, obviously the extreme wedding that's going on, it could be made stronger, and that's what I think that he wanted the 90-day period for a review of those policies, and I'm sure we'll be seeing that going forward.
All right, let's go to Manal now in Washington, D.C. So Saba thinks that the policy is fine. The policy is absolutely fine. It's just been executed wrongly. So they've bungled the policy, but it's okay to highlight individuals with links to 7 specific Muslim-majority countries. What's your take on that?
I mean, absolutely not. It's un-American, it's unconstitutional. We're very happy to see judges stepping forward and deem it as such. and issue orders where a lot of Border Patrol are now contempt of court by not abiding by the court. And so, I often use Benjamin Franklin, one of our founding fathers, who cautioned. He said, "He who tries to sacrifice liberties for security will gain neither." And that's what we're seeing today. And I think it's very important to point out the actual numbers of immigrants who have committed, American deaths. There's only been 2. When you look at American right-wingers or the gun control issue, you have over 11,000 American deaths. So when you look at the numbers, it does not add up. Of the 7 countries, we have bombed 5 and had heavy sanctions over 2, and yet not one of those countries have had an immigrant do an attack on our land. So it simply doesn't add up. My theory is Donald Trump is offering distractions. He cannot deliver what he promised to his base, so he's going for the weakest link, which is the Muslim community and the Muslim countries at large. But this is purely a distraction because he will not deliver what he promised.
You've almost taken the words out of my mouth, because now I would like to look at some of those issues that you raised, because the US government says that this travel ban is about stopping what it calls terrorism, but is it really the answer? Now, the order, it's an executive order, recalls the September 11th attacks of 2001, but the 19 hijackers on those planes were from Saudi Arabia, from Egypt, the UAE, and Lebanon. Now, none of those countries are on this list, and immigrants from the 7 countries on the list haven't committed any fatal attacks at all on US soil since 2001, as Manal's just pointed out. Now, the San Bernardino shooting and bombing in December 2015, as well as the Orlando nightclub massacre in June last year, they were carried out by 2 US citizens and a Pakistani immigrant in the country legally. Now, this executive order wouldn't have prevented any of them from being in the country, and it doesn't address other politically motivated attacks like the Charleston church shooting of 2015, in which white supremacist Dylan Roof killed 9 African Americans as they prayed. And so let's come back to you then, Daniel. I've been quite taken by John McCain and Lindsey Graham, who've broken away from the Republican pack, haven't they? And suggested that this executive order is likely to do more to help terrorist recruiting efforts than enhance US security. Is that what you agree with?
I certainly agree with that, and I think ISIS is already making good use of it. I also think that it will decrease our safety materially because it sends a signal to Muslim communities in the United States that they are in for a long-term experience of isolation and discrimination. And those are exactly the kinds of signals we don't need to send at a time when those communities are providing something like 40% of the tips that the US government receives on extremists who may be involved in terrorist plotting. So this has nothing to do with counterterrorism and everything to do with making good on campaign promises and solidifying or paying off, if you will, the seriously Islamophobic part of Trump's base.
So, Saba, I have to come to you. How does it feel then to be supporting somebody who's being accused not only of being Islamophobic himself, but of whipping up Islamophobia within the country? Even John McCain, Lindsey Graham, senior Republicans are pulling back from this policy, fearful for what the consequences may be.
Right, and I think we will see more GOP leadership step up and speak for Muslims. I think that goes to the point that Muslim Americans need to be involved within the Republican Party to make sure such type of religious bans are not enacted. We're not at the table. We need to get involved in policy circles within the White House and Congress and the judicial branch to make our voices heard. We can't just go around playing blame games or complaining about it all the time, and we can't be reactionary. I wish that we were much more proactive within the Trump's campaign, and I hope to see more Muslim leadership within the United States get more involved and to set the policies within the White House and work with Donald Trump on making sure that they don't target our religion or our people.
But how do you feel yourself as a Muslim woman today in the United States under this new administration? Ever since the electoral cycle began, we were hearing more and more reports of women having their hijab pulled off Muslims just on the end of verbal abuse, if not physical abuse, all around the country. This is the kind of climate that's been created by this political clique that are now occupying the White House.
Right. I mean, obviously, there is the climate of fear in this country for Muslims. But again, like I said, we have faith in God. And I believe that we can't live in fear. We have to be proactive. We must get involved. We have a huge opportunity. We're already within this country. We are citizens of the United States. We need to be active and make our voices heard and make sure that they enact policies that respect our religion and the Muslim community.
All right, Manal.
We can't alienate 1.7 billion Muslims around the world in the name of national security.
No, indeed. Manal, this was a big pledge, wasn't it, on the campaign trail? At one point, Donald Trump was suggesting that there would be a shutdown completely of all Muslims entering the United States. He's relaxed a little bit on that front. But what do you think the overall impact of this executive order, beyond the chaos at the airports, beyond the tears at airports and families not being able to reunite, what do you think the overall impact of it will be?
Well, I think that there's a few things to point out. One thing is, those who are like Saba, who continue to blindly support Trump, will be judged harshly, not only by history, but their children. I really feel sad for the conversation that Saba will eventually have to have with her children for blindly supporting a man that's not only targeting the Muslim communities. Make no mistake, this is American values that are under attack. And the result has been, and I think one of the impacts that I would like to highlight, which is positive, is the overwhelming solidarity and the intersectionality that is emerged. Muslim community has connected with Black Lives Matter. They've connected with the scientists in climate change. They've connected with the women's movement, with the LGBTQ community. And what is happening is a united front that will really protect American values. And I really question which side people will fall on, because this is not about Democratic or Republican. As you pointed out, Republican leaders, including Condoleezza Rice during elections, has come out to denounce the horrible rhetoric that has emerged from this campaign and which we're seeing reflected now in executive orders. So, for me, I think the impact is a much stronger intersectionality, recognizing that we're all in the fight of our lives to protect American values. That's what's at stake, not just the Muslim community.
Now, Daniel, what's likely to happen to this executive order? It's a policy that's clearly been implemented badly, but can it be repealed? There are several challenges going through the courts right now.
It can be struck down on the basis of being unconstitutional, as I understand it. However, it's important to underscore that in our system of government, the president gets a great deal of latitude from the courts on issues of national security. So it will be necessary for opponents of the executive order to demonstrate that this is, in fact, contrary to our Constitution, particularly with regard to its discrimination against particular religious groups, and also that there are a number of other considerations, questions of due process and the like. But I don't think anyone should have any illusions. This is going to be quite difficult, and I personally believe that this is meant to be the thin edge of the wedge, and that we should expect that other countries in the Muslim world would be added to this list later. There's no question that the administration wanted to avoid offending Saudi Arabia and Pakistan right now, but I, for one, believe that it's only a matter of time before we see other countries join that list.
I was going to actually ask you this point. It's an interesting choice of countries. All of these countries, pretty much, apart from Iran, are in a state of conflict. They're in a state of disarray. Many people needing to flee for their lives from these countries, apart from Iran. Why do you think Iran has now made it onto the list, onto this executive order? Relations, of course, have not been brilliant, but of recently we thought were improving.
Well, I wasn't surprised at all to see Iran on the list. The administration has made its anti-Iranian sentiment abundantly clear throughout the campaign, focusing primarily on the Iranian nuclear accord, the JCPOA, I'm not sure how quickly they're going to be able to come up with a coherent policy on that, especially since Secretary of Defense Mattis opposes withdrawal from the nuclear accord. But at the same time, Iran is viewed as a disruptive and hostile power. And the fact is, Iran has been behind a great deal of terrorism aimed against the United States, but particularly against its partners. So I'm not surprised to find Iran on that list, and it's another way of sending a signal.
And Saba, obviously, as we've just heard, Pakistan is not on the list, but Daniel suspects that Pakistan could be added to the list at some point. Now, I know that you're of Pakistani heritage. Maybe you have a lot of family in Pakistan. How's that going to make you feel as an American of Pakistani ancestry who is restricted from going in and out of the country to go about your ordinary family business?
Well, we're very concerned. Obviously, my family comes from Pakistan, and they're very seriously concerned about traveling back and forth, and about the implications this is going to have on even green card holders or dual nationals. But at the same time, that's why I think Pakistani Americans need to lobby for their interests, and our voices are only going to be getting louder and stronger in Washington, D.C. We do look forward to working with the Trump administration in terms of making sure that Pakistan's not added to the list, and if it does, to make sure that we can work through those issues on a case-by-case basis.
But
the other part I wanted to mention, Saudi Arabia.
Please do, Saba, sorry.
Saudi Arabia currently already bans Iran, all visas from Iran and Yemen. They're currently at war with Yemen, and there are Middle Eastern countries that already ban travel from certain countries. So it's not something that's coming out of just the United States. There are people with legitimate concerns against ISIS in Iraq, Syria, and other places where I think in the interest of national security, countries have a right to defend their borders. And that's what Donald Trump is going to be arguing, that under national security pretext, he has the right to limit people from certain countries.
I'm sure that your loyalty is being commended by the White House. But I'm just wondering, on a really personal note, Saba, within the last week or so, have you wavered? Has your support for Donald Trump wavered? Have you got the least flicker of concern as to your position in your country as a consequence of the inauguration?
Well, I was at the inauguration, and I do see presidential leadership coming out of the White House. He is a decisive president. He has the leadership. He's not going to be playing games or be weak on foreign policies like Obama was. But at the same time, obviously, the way it's playing out, he obviously could do a much better job scrutinizing it. And he wanted to have that element of surprise and, decisive action. And I think he's getting that. But at the same time, as an American, Muslim American, Pakistani American, I'm very concerned about how this is going to be impacting our community. I see what's going on at the airports, protests all across the country. But I think the way to go is not just protesting, but lobbying strongly for our interests. We can't just ignore the president of the United States. He is in power, and he will be for the next several years. And it's really important for our community to get involved with lobbying the administration for our interests.
All right. Manal, I know that you have Palestinian heritage. How does all of this make you feel?
So for me, regardless of my heritage, even if there was not one country listed from the Middle East, I would be on the streets protesting and fighting back, because this isn't just an attack, as I've said, on Muslims or Arabs. This is against our American values. And I find it horrifying that we would compare ourselves to Saudi Arabia or Yemen. I think the White House itself would be horrified by that comparison. The Human Rights Watch has reported the violations of Saudi Arabia. Yemen is considered a fragile state. We do uphold ourselves to different values. And what we're seeing is an attack on the very foundation of a land that was built by immigrants for immigrants and has always welcomed refugees. I will say that the amount of solidarity we've seen is from all across the board. It's from every social movement. It is not restricted to Arabs and Muslims. And every fight that we have against the White House will represent all the intersectionality of the American people.
Manal Omar, Daniel Benjamin and Saba Ahmed, thank you all very much indeed. And as ever, thank you for watching the programme. You can see it again anytime you like by going to the website, aljazeera.com. If you want more discussion, there's our Facebook page, facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can always join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Martine Dennis, and the whole team here in Doha, it's bye for now.